Miriam. So at this point in time, the Egyptians have effectively left Egypt. They have gone through the Reed Sea, the Red Sea, which again, those are two different things. It's kind of in debate and everything on where exactly they crossed, except for the fact that we do actually have it marked by Solomon, what's called Solomon's Pillars on each side of the river, where he claims that they crossed, but you're going to run into a whole lot of pushback and everything when it comes to just scholars, historians, Egyptologists, stuff like that. They're all going to have their own play on this. But luckily, I'm not teaching their play. I'm teaching the Bible. So we're going to start in chapter 15. After that happened, it says, Then Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord. And I'm not singing it. It says, I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. Both horse and driver he is hurled into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my defense. He has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will praise him. My father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a warrior. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots, I can't talk today. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he has hurled into the sea. The best of Pharaoh's officers are drowned in the Red Sea. The deep waters have covered them. They sank to the depths like a stone. Your right hand, Lord, was majestic in power. Your right hand, Lord, shattered the enemy. In the greatness of your majesty, you threw down those who opposed you. You unleashed your burning anger. It consumed them like a stubble. And by the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up. The surging waters stood up like a wall. The deep waters congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy boasted, I will pursue. I will overtake them. I will divide the spoils. I will gorge myself on them. I will draw my sword, and my hand will destroy them. But you blew with your breath, and the sea covered them. They sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who among the gods is like you, Lord? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glory, working wonders? You stretched out your right hand, and the earth swallows your enemies. In your unfailing love, you will lead the people you have redeemed. In your strength, you will guide them to your holy dwelling. The nations will hear and tremble. Anguish will grip the people of Philistia. The chiefs of Edom will be terrified. The leaders of Moab will be seized with trembling. The people of Canaan will melt away. Terror and dread will fall upon them. By the power of your arm, they will be as still as a stone until your people pass by, Lord, until the people you bought pass by. You will bring them in and plant them on the mountain of your inheritance, the place, Lord, you made for your dwelling, the sanctuary, Lord, your hands established. The Lord reigns forever and ever. And when Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and horsemen went into the sea, the Lord brought the waters of the sea back over them, but the Israelites walked through on the sea on dry ground. And then Miriam the prophet, Aaron's sister, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women followed with her with timbrels dancing. Miriam sang to them, Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. Both horse and driver he has hurled into the sea. So in this song, we're actually finding out a whole lot about God, or the Israelites are really finding out a whole lot about God. They name several aspects of him. So if you go back, you can see where it says, the Lord is my strength, my defense. He has become my salvation. The Lord is a warrior. And I'm actually reading a book right now. It's called Experiencing God. It's a pretty well-known book, and it's also kind of morphed into a Bible study. But one thing that's in this book that's so interesting, especially in the stuff that we're talking about right now, is God has so many facets of himself. I mean, literally, if you went down the entire Bible and everything, it's hundreds. The Lord is my strength. He's my shield. He's my salvation. He's my portion. He's my rock. It just goes on and on and on. And the question we have to ask ourselves is what part of that have we actually experienced? And everybody's different. For some people, they may have experienced him as their sword. And when he sits there and he says, don't get revenge, that's my job. And then you see that actually happen. Somebody that has wronged you, well, it seems like God is kind of taking care of the situation himself. Some people have experienced him as their shield. Hopefully everybody in this room has experienced them as his salvation. But there's so many aspects to God, and what we ought to do is, as we're going through the Bible, we should really write these down. And if there's an aspect to God that we've never actually seen, whether we feel that we've never felt the Abba Father version of God, and we've only felt the El Shaddai, the Lord Almighty version of God, pray for that. Pray to experience God in all these different facets. Because he even says earlier down the line with Moses, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob knew me pretty well. I spoke to them directly, but they only knew that side of me. They didn't know all the other sides that I have to offer. They only knew Lord God Almighty. They knew that side of me. They never got to experience the Abba Father side of me. So that's something we should just realize in our own life and everything. Like, what parts of God have we personally not experienced that we want to? And we can pray and we can study for that. So then it says, then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert of Shur. For 3 days they traveled in the desert without finding water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink its waters because it was bitter. Marah means bitter. So we actually come across this in the book of Ruth. Naomi, her name is Naomi, and when she goes home, she's had all these bad experiences happen to her, and they're like, Mara's home, or Naomi's home, and she's like, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. I'm bitter. So it says that is why the place is called Mara, because it's bitter. So the people grumbled against Moses, saying, well, what are we to drink? And then Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood, and he threw it into the water, and the water became fit to drink. And there the Lord issued an instruction for them to put them to the test. And he said, if you listen carefully to the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all his decrees, then I will not bring on you any of the disease that I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. Okay, there's another aspect of God, the Lord who heals us. And they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees, and they camped there near the water. So what he just said is very, very important, because this is not going to change. Okay, God tells the Israelites, if you keep my decrees, if you do what I say, if you follow my instructions, then you guys are golden. You're good. You don't have to worry about anything. I will take care of all of it. Okay? You will not be sick. I will not throw diseases on you. Nobody's going to overcome you. Nobody's going to overtake you if you do these things. They don't. And it doesn't take very long for them not to. So it says, the whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, if we had only died by the Lord's hand in Egypt, there we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. And the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you, and the people to go out each day and gather enough for that day. And in this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. And on the 6th day they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. So that's because of the Sabbath. So in other words, God is going to rain down this dew-like substance that is essentially going to form like this flat, wafery type of cookie, okay? and they're going to go out and they're going to break this up on the ground, and they're going to take just enough for each person in the tent and each person in their family. It's called an ephah. So they're going to take an ephah worth of food for each person in the tent. Okay? Now, when it comes to the day before the Sabbath, which I don't know if we've covered this or not, but when we think of the Sabbath, sometimes we think of Sunday. Okay? Sunday is not the Sabbath. Sunday is what's called the Lord's Day. That doesn't come till way later. The Sabbath is from when you see the first star in the sky on Friday to the first star in the sky on Saturday. Remember, in the book of Genesis and everything, he created night, he created morning the first day. So night in the Hebrew calendar, the way the Hebrews look at time, is night is the beginning of the day. Okay? The day is the latter part of the day. Okay? We do it opposite. But, so, in other words, the day before the Sabbath, you are to collect twice as much, because on the Sabbath, you're not going to get any. You're not going to work. Okay? So prepare it, gather it, prepare it. Because on the Sabbath, you're not going to do none of this. Now, here's the miraculous thing about this, and we'll get to this here in a second, but this is just something so that way you understand it. Number one, it's called manna, okay, because the Hebrew word mano means, what is it? So that's why they call it manna, because they literally walk outside and they're like, what is this stuff? So, which, when God sits there and says, I'm going to rain down bread, and then all of a sudden you see this flat, wafery cookie residue on the ground, they're like, are you for real? This is not bread. So I think he raised their hopes a little bit. But nonetheless, they come out of their tents, and they're literally going, what is it? Like, what is this stuff? What am I supposed to do with this? Sooner or later, after eating this stuff for a couple of months, I'm sure Mrs. Moses made a cookbook of 101 ways to cook manna. I don't know, but this stuff had to get old. They literally ate this stuff for 40 years. So, but nonetheless, they go out there, they collect it. After the next day, if they keep what they collected, or if they got too much of it, it becomes rotten. It becomes full of maggots and it starts to smell. Except for the day before the Sabbath. Then the manna lasts 2 days. Except for the manna that is instructed to put in a golden jar and put in the 10 Commandments. That lasted forever. So this whole entire thing is literally one big miracle. Okay, the whole situation is just one big miracle. God is in charge of the entire thing. Okay, and there's a point to that. He's trying to teach these guys because, and I don't want to pick on the Israelites because we're the exact same way, but he is trying to teach the Israelites very slowly and very precisely. You have to rely on me. Trust me. Okay? Don't trust what you know. Don't trust what you think. Don't trust what was. Don't trust what you think is going to be. Trust me. Okay? And they don't get it. They just don't get it. They don't get it all. That's the reason why they're in the wilderness for 40 days or 40 years, is because they were in 40 days. They were in the land of the Canaanites. I believe it was 12, if I remember correctly. 12 of them, along with Joshua and Caleb. Joshua and Caleb came back, says, I don't care what those guys look like. We can take them. God says we can do it. We're going to do it. The other ones were like, have you seen those guys? Those guys are on steroids. There is no way we're going to beat these guys. There is no possibility of this happening. And God said, for every day that you were in that land not trusting me, you will stay in this desert 1 year. So he's trying to teach them, trust me. So he sits there and he says, so Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, in the evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we that you should grumble against us? In other words, why are you blaming me? I just did what I was told. Moses also said, "You will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening and all the bread you want in the morning, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we? You are not grumbling against us, but against the Lord." Then Moses told Aaron, "Say to the entire Israelite community, 'Come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling.'" And while Aaron was speaking to the whole Israelite community, they looked towards the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in the cloud. And the Lord said to Moses, "I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God." And that evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. And when the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. And when the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Take an omer," or excuse me, I said ephah. "Take an omer for each person that you have in your tent." The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much, some little. And when they measured it by the omer, the one who gathered much did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. Everyone had gathered just as much as they needed. And then Moses said to them, "No one is to keep any of it until morning." However, some of them paid no attention to Moses, and they kept part of it until morning, and it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry with them. Each morning everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. On the sixth day they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person, and the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. And he said to them, "This is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be the day of Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. Save whatever is left and keep it until morning." So they saved it until morning, as Moses commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots in it. "Eat it today," Moses said, "because today is a Sabbath to the Lord. You will not find any of it on the ground today. 6 days you are to gather it, but on the seventh day, the Sabbath, there will not be any." Nevertheless, some of the people went out on the seventh day to gather it, but they found none. And then the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commands and my instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. That is why on the sixth day he gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where they are on the seventh day. No one is to go out." So the people rested on the seventh day. So this is true today. If you're an Orthodox Jew and you follow these commandments, one of the things that we have to watch out for is, like, say like you're in a town that is essentially Orthodox Jew, okay? They take this very seriously. There's actually like a twine that goes all the way around the town. Like you can see it up above, like where the telephone poles are. And the whole purpose of that is that is the area that you are allowed to go, okay? If you were in the town, you are taking a walk. If you step outside of that line, you are now on a journey. That is work, okay? This gets very, very serious in this part of the world, or should I say that part of the world, to the point where there are some hotels that they have what is called a Sabbath elevator, okay? And what that is, it is an elevator that literally goes to every floor nonstop. Every single floor opens up, comes back, next floor opens up, next floor opens up. The reason why is because if you get on an elevator and you push a button, you're making a spark. That spark is fire. That means you are working. Okay? It is that hardcore. So if you ever go to Israel, not every hotel has these, but if you ever go to Israel, you may go into a hotel where they're going to have what's called a Sabbath elevator. Don't get on it unless you're on the second floor, because you'll be there for a while. So it says, let's see, where are we at here? So the people of Israel called the bread manna. It was white like coriander seed and tasted like wafers made with honey. And Moses said, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Take an omer of manna and keep it for the generations to come, so that they can see the bread I gave you to eat in the wilderness when I brought you out of Egypt." So Moses said to Aaron, "Take a jar and put an omer of manna in it. and then place it before the Lord to be kept for generations to come. As the Lord commanded Moses, Aaron put the manna with the tablets of the covenant law so that it might be preserved. The Israelites ate manna for 40 years until they came to a land that was settled, and they ate manna until they reached the border of Canaan. So an omer is 1/10 of an ephah. So what happened to this jar? Okay. So later on down the line in Kings, what we're going to find out, I think it's Second Kings actually. What we're going to find out is that the Ark of the Covenant is actually taken by the Philistines. Okay, when they take it back. All right, they take it back to their camp. They open it. When they do, they are infested with. The Bible basically calls it like boils or lumps. The best thing that even in the Hebrew that we can really come up with is either the first sign of bubonic plague or it was literally terminal hemorrhoids. But it was the actual word is swelling. So that he infected them with swellings all over their body. Okay, and it killed them. It was fatal. It didn't kill the entire camp. They got rid of it. But what we found out later is the three things that were in, or we find out before this, but when we find out that it's not there anymore later on down the line, the three things that were in the Ark of the Covenant were the Ten Commandments, the staff of Aaron that blossomed, and the jar of manna. Those are the three things that were in there. After it comes back from the Philistines give it back. They're like, okay, they transfer it from another Philistine camp. They have the same problem. Finally, they're like, let's give it back to the Israelites. They can deal with this. They give it back to the Israelites. Nothing happens to the Israelites. But when we find out what is actually inside of the Ark of the Covenant, the only thing left is the Ten Commandments. That's it. So you can see that happening. Open it up. What's in there? Well, there's a staff here with a flower on it. Who cares? Throw it away. There's a golden jar with a bunch of cookies in it. Okay, throw the cookies away. Keep the jar. And there's some stones in here with some writing on it. Okay, who cares? They were going to sell it. They were basically going to either tear down the ark and sell it for what it was made out of, which essentially it was overlaid with gold, or they were just going to throw it in their treasury as it was, and eventually just keep it part of their treasury. But it didn't work out that way. So, unfortunately, if we ever find the Ark of the Covenant, it's not going to have the manna in it because it's not there anymore. So it says the whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." Well, why did they go to Rephidim? Because Rephidim was actually, it was not, I wouldn't really call it an oasis, but there is a substantial water source there. But for whatever reason, it was dried up. Okay? So that's why they were going there, was for the water. And it says, Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test?" In other words, you see what he does. He's trying to teach you to trust him in everything. And yet the second something gets hard, the second something gets complicated, the second an obstacle pops up in your way, instead of praying to the Lord and saying, "Lord, we need your help. Can you please help us? Can you take care of your children for us? Can you please, come down or do whatever it is you need to do, but fix this situation." Instead, they just start grumbling. They start yelling. They start cursing. Why did you do this? Why did you take us out of Egypt? There's no appreciation whatsoever there. If you notice, and this always kind of floored me, God says over and over and over again, not just in the Old Testament, I mean all the way through the entire Bible, "I am the Lord. I brought you out of Egypt." Okay? That is supposed to be a major milestone for the Israelites. I brought you out of Egypt. Okay? I took you out of slavery. I made you a nation. It's like they don't care. Especially right now. They're just like, "Why did you take us out of Egypt? We had lots of food there. And we were cool. It was fine until you did this. Why did you do this?" Okay? They don't. It's like they have the complete opposite reaction that you would think they would have. But he sits there and he says, "But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. And they said, 'Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and the livestock die of thirst. And then Moses cried out to the Lord, what am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me. And the Lord answered Moses, go out in front of the people, and take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile. Go there, and I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and the water will come out of it for the people to drink. So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel. And he called the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled, and because they tested the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? So interesting thing here, you can actually go there, and I can't really, I'm not going to sit there and tell you 100% for sure, but that this is actually the rock. But if you actually go to this place now, there actually is a rock there, and it is probably about my height, and it is literally cracked like this and split apart. It's like he hit it and it just split apart. Okay, now whether that's the actual rock or not, I don't know. But there actually is that something there that kind of gives credence to the story. Now, the interesting thing is, when it comes to this, is not only is God trying to teach the Israelites a lesson, he's trying to teach Moses a lesson. Moses eventually fails. Okay? In this particular case, he says, I want you to go and I want you to strike the rock. Okay? Water will flow. Strike the rock, I will be with you, the water will come. So he does. He strikes the rock, and the rock splits, and water starts to flow out of it. Later on down the line, Moses is really fed up. He is angry at this point. He is tired of the Israelites moaning and crying and whining and all sorts of stuff. He is just done with it. Okay? And essentially what winds up happening is God says, I want you to go and I want you to speak to this rock. And when you speak to this rock will split and water will flow. Okay? And Moses is so frustrated and so angry that he sits there and he says, y'all want water? Fine, here's your water. And he takes it and he whacks it like that. And it splits and water comes out. Only problem is, that ain't what God said to do. And God says, well, I'm glad you had your little temper tantrum. But that wasn't my command. And now, because you have disobeyed me, you're not going to the land of the Canaanites. You're going to die over here. So even Moses messed up. Okay? We could take a number of things out of that. So number one, why was it so important for Moses to do what he was supposed to do as opposed to hitting a rock? Because God was trying to show the Israelites, it's not Moses, it's me. I'm the one doing this, not him. Okay? If Moses just does whatever he likes to do and all of a sudden miracles start happening, they're going to worship Moses. You ever wonder why, and I'm jumping ahead here in the story, but you ever wonder why it's a very, very small part of the Bible, and it's most people don't even know it's there, honestly. But it sits there and he talks about how Michael and Satan fought over the body of Moses. Okay? Why? Why do you think that is? Because if they would have had, nobody knows where Moses is buried. Nobody. Okay? One of the most instrumental figures in both Judaism and Christianity, nobody knows where he is. Okay? There's a reason why. And there's a reason why Satan battled Michael over Moses' body. Because if Moses' body ever would have been found, it would have been worshipped. It would have been worshipped. It would have completely and totally taken away from God, and it would have been worshipped by the Israelites. Okay? It would be in a museum right now. People would be praying to it. So, and if you don't believe me, is there not a section of Christianity that prays to Mary? Okay? It would have been the exact same thing for the Israelites. They would have been praying to Moses. So, at the end of the day, God makes sure that did not happen. He hid that body. Nobody knows where it's at except for him and the angels and Satan. And Satan tried to get a hold of it, and Michael stopped him. So, it says the Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. So they're on their property, or what they claim to be their property. And Moses said to Joshua, this is the first time we get to meet Joshua. Joshua right now is a very young man, but he's a warrior. He says, choose some of our men and go out and fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands. So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered, and Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning, but whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on one side and one on the other, so that his hands remained steady till sunset. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. And the Lord said to Moses, write this on a scroll as something to be remembered, just to make sure that Joshua hears it, because I will completely blot out the name of Amalek from under heaven. So Moses built an altar and called it, the Lord is my banner. So that's another one. The Lord is my banner. He said, because his hands were lifted up against the throne of the Lord, and the Lord will be at war against the Amalekites from generation to generation. So again, why did he do that? Okay, because now he's showing the Israelites, you guys don't have the ability to win these wars. You don't have it in you. You're not warriors, you're slaves. But I will fight for you. As long as Abraham had his hands up in praise, God was fighting the battle, and God was winning. Moses? Moses' hands up in praise of God. Yeah. Oh, did I say Abraham? Sorry, wrong book. I'm going into so many different books now. I'm going into Rewind. So it says, now this is golden. I love this story. This is one of the stories in the Bible that you just know that the Bible is real, because this is you can absolutely see this happening today, let alone back then. So it says, now Jethro, the priest of Midian, and the father-in-law of Moses, heard of everything God had done for Moses and for his people Israel, and how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Well, how did he hear that? Well, we'll find out here in a minute. After Moses had sent his wife Zipporah and his father-in-law Jethro received her and her 2 sons. One son was named Gershom, for Moses had said, I have become a foreigner in a foreign land, and the other was named Eleazar, for he said, my father's God was my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh. So Moses literally sends back his wife and 2 kids. To which Jethro, now remember, Jethro had 7 daughters, okay? And he was like, where is this guy? Some dude rescued you? Where is he at? Let's get him here. We're going to serve him dinner. One of y'all ladies is getting out of this house, okay? So now all of a sudden the lady and 2 kids come back to his house, and he's like, oh, I don't think so. And he literally turns around and he takes the daughter and the 2 kids back to Moses. He's like, you are not laying this on me. So he brings them back. So Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, together with Moses' sons and wife, came to him in the wilderness, where he was camped near the mountain of God. And Jethro had sent word to him, I, your father-in-law, Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons. So Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him, and they greeted each other, and they went into the tent. Moses told his father-in-law about everything the Lord had done to Pharaoh and the Egyptians for Israel's sake, and about all the hardships that they had met along the way, and how the Lord had saved them. Jethro was delighted to hear about all the good things the Lord had done for Israel in rescuing them from the hand of the Egyptians. And he said, praise be to the Lord who rescued you from the hand of the Egyptians and of Pharaoh, and who rescued the people from the hand of the Egyptians. Now, I know that the Lord is greater than all the other gods, for he did this to those who had treated Israel arrogantly. Then Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and other sacrifices to God, and Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law in the presence of God. So again, going back to what we were talking about in the last couple of classes, I've touched on it several different times now, but he sits there and he says, I know that the Lord is more powerful than all the other gods, okay? And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Okay, so I always sit there and I tell you guys that God does not actually declare that he is the only God, okay, until the book of Isaiah. And every time I say that in the Bible class, people look at me and they're like, what? And it's the truth. In the book of Exodus, he's going to say things that are similar to that. He's going to sit there and say, I am the Alpha, I am the Omega, I created the earth, I did this, I did that, okay? But even here, Moses didn't sit there and say, well, actually, all the other gods are just nonsense. It's because Moses is still believing all the other gods exist. Okay? God is just more powerful than all the other gods. God went from a lowly little god in a little bitty bush on the backside of the desert to literally conquering all the Egyptian gods. Okay? So he has shown in his own way, bit by bit, how strong and how powerful he is. But in Isaiah 45, he says it several times over. He sits there and he says, I am the Lord, and there is no other. Apart from me, there is no God. And he states further, there is no God apart from me, a righteous God and a Savior. There is none but me. Okay? So later on down the line from where we're at now, he's going to sit there and he's going to tell the Israelites, I'm a jealous God. Quit worshiping other gods. You're supposed to worship me. But when we get to the book of Isaiah, which is around the time of the Assyrian captivity, when they basically conquer the northern kingdom, he's telling everybody now that by this point they can kind of understand it and they can kind of start getting behind it. He's telling them, you guys don't get it, okay? You're literally worshiping dolls, all right? You're creating a little voodoo thing out of wood, and you're putting it up on your mantle, and you're praying to something that is a tree, okay? I'm it. There are no other gods. It's just me, okay? And I'm getting tired of you worshiping wood. So it isn't until the book of Isaiah that he absolutely lays that down. Right now, we're still under that premise that there are other gods. And I had somebody ask me the other day, I was talking about this with them, and they go, well, do you believe that other gods existed? I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying the other gods did exist. I'm saying that everybody thought they existed. God did not correct that. Why? Okay, think about this. Look how hard it is for the Israelites right now to conform to God's will. Okay? How hard is that for them? They have gone from one type of lifestyle, now they're facing an entirely new lifestyle. Okay? This is not easy. Imagine if God just sat down and everything in physical form, just sat down at a table, just had all the Israelites around him and everything with a bunch of speakerphones everywhere, and he just started telling them all the secrets of the universe. Okay? Yeah, by the way, I'm the only one here. Man, you should have seen that dinosaur that I created on day 2. I mean, there's no way. They would not have comprehended it. There is just no way. Jesus tells us that. He sits there and he says, you guys don't even understand earthly things. How am I supposed to teach you spiritual things and heavenly things? Okay? So God is doing this at a very slow pace. He is doing this at a very slow pace. He is not telling them, I'm the only one yet. Because they have literally been inundated with this lifestyle of believing that there are hundreds of gods out there. So the first thing he's doing is he is showing that he is above them. And when we get to the 10 Commandments, he's going to double down on that. Okay? So he says, the next day Moses took his seat to serve as judge for the people, and they stood around him from morning till evening. And when his father-in-law saw that all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, what is this you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge, for all these people stand around you from morning until evening? Moses answered him, because the people come to seek God's will. Whenever they have a dispute, it is brought to me, and I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instructions. And Moses' father-in-law replied, well, what you're doing is not good. You and these people who come to you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you, and you cannot handle it alone. Listen now to me, and I will give you some advice, and may God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. Teach them his decrees and instructions and show them the way they are to live and how they are to behave. But select capable men from all the people, men who fear God, trustworthy men who hate dishonest gain, and appoint them as officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. Have them serve as judges for the people at all times, but have them bring their very difficult cases to you. In the simple cases, they can decide for themselves. That will make your load lighter because they will share it with you. And if you do this, and God so commands, you will be able to stand the strain, and all these people will go home satisfied. So essentially what he's saying is quit waiting until something bad happens and then sitting there saying, okay, well, this is what God commands. You need to teach everybody what he commands in total. And then break it down and delegate it. Okay, you're the president. Now you need to make governors, and then you need to make mayors, and then you need to make city councilmen. Okay, handle this in that fashion. If anybody's got a really bad dispute and they need to take it up to the Supreme Court, that's you. Okay. Other than that, everybody else is fine. So again, this just comes down to wisdom. So something that's lacking in this generation and everything like that is young people do not go to old people and say, you've lived twice as long as me, and you've probably seen some stuff. I have a question. How should I handle this? Instead, most of the time, you're like, I saw it on YouTube. I got it. So, and that's going to wind up biting them in the butt. So this was his wisdom kind of pouring out on Moses, and Moses followed it. He was wise enough to follow it. So then Moses sent his father-in-law on his way, and Jethro returned to his own country. Huh? Oh, whoops, sorry. Moses listened to his father-in-law and did everything that he said. He chose capable men from all Israel and made them leaders of the people, officials over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and 10. They served as judges for all the people at all times. The difficult cases they brought to Moses, but the simple ones they decided for themselves. And then Moses sent his father-in-law on his way, and Jethro returned to his own country without his daughter and grandchildren. So on the first day of the month, after the Israelites left Egypt, on that very day, they came to the desert of Sinai. And after they set out from Rephidim, they encountered the desert of Sinai, and the Israel camped there in the desert in front of the mountain. Then Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain and said, this is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, and he's going to say it again, in case they didn't figure it out the first time. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. So Moses went back and summoned the elders of the people and set before them all the words of the Lord had commanded him to speak. The people all responded together, we will do everything the Lord has said. So Moses brought their answer back to the Lord. I wonder how many of them had the cross fingers and everything back. Then the Lord said to Moses, I am going to come to you in a dense cloud, so that the people will hear me speaking with you and will always put their trust in you. And then Moses told the Lord what the people had said. So I guess probably the argument was, because God doesn't do anything for nothing. There's always a reason. My guess is that the argument was, even though we've seen all these miraculous things, even though we've seen everything that God can do, people were probably sitting there going, maybe it's just this guy, he's just hearing voices. Maybe he's just got powers or something like that. Maybe it's him the whole time. So God's like, okay, I'm going to show them I really am here. And it doesn't go so well. So he says, and the Lord said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Have them wash their clothes and be ready by the third day. Because on that day, the Lord will come down to Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. Put limits for the people around the mountain and tell them, be careful that you do not approach the mountain or touch the foot of it. Whoever touches the mountain will be put to death. They are to be stoned or shot with arrows. Not a hand is to be laid on them. In other words, do not touch them because they will essentially be cursed. You're going to have to kill them from afar. So, no person or animal shall be permitted to live. Only the ram's horn sound a long blast when they approach the mountain. Or only when the ram's horn sounds a long blast may they approach the mountain. So when the horn blasts, everybody can come to the mountain, but nobody can touch the foot of it. It is a holy place. They are not prepared to step on a holy place. So after Moses had gone down to the mountain of the people, he consecrated them, and they washed their clothes. And he said to the people, prepare yourselves for the third day, and abstain from sexual relations. Well, why? Well, essentially because the next day and everything, they are going to be gods. Okay, they are going to literally hear the voice of God. Okay, they're not to enter any kind of a mingled relationship with anything else. This is time for God. Okay, so that's the reason why. Even if they're husband and wife and everything, the Bible tells us there should be a time where you should set each other apart and everything like that, so that way you can pray and you can, in a sense, be more holy in that regard. And then after that time, come back together again. And he's telling them now, don't do that. Okay, this is my time. So he says, on the morning of the third day, there was thunder and lightning with a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. And then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it in fire. The smoke billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace, and the whole mountain trembled violently. As the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder, Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him. And the Lord descended to the top of Mount Sinai and called Moses to the top of the mountain. So Moses went up, and the Lord said to him, go down and warn the people so they do not force their way through to see the Lord, and many of them perish. Even the priests who approach, the Lord must consecrate themselves, or the Lord will break out against them. So Moses said to the Lord, the people cannot come up Mount Sinai because you yourself warned us. Put limits around the mountain and set it apart as holy. And then the Lord replied, go down and bring Aaron up with you. But the priest and the people must not force their way to come up to the Lord, or he will break out against them. So Moses went down to the people and told them. So again, he's telling them, keep your distance. This isn't playtime. This isn't let's go see what's in the smoke. This isn't let's see the dude behind the curtain like in the Wizard of Oz. He's telling them, stay away. You can come here and you can go no further. That's it. He will do this again. And this really will go on in everything in perpetuity all the way until the days of Jesus and everything. He will do this again with the tabernacle. You will have the holy place, and then you will have the Holy of Holies. And it will be divided by a very thick curtain, okay, that goes from wall to wall, floor to ceiling, all right? No one is allowed to go back there except for one time, one day a year, and it has to be the great high priest, okay? The high priest is the only one that can do that. And when he does that, he gets a rope tied around his foot, because if in any way, shape, or form he is not prepared, okay, if he has not atoned for his own sin before he goes in there, and he has to atone for his own sin, and then he has to atone for Israel's sin, one day a year on Yom Kippur. If he goes in there and God decides he is not worthy, he will strike him dead then and there, and they literally use the rope to pull him out. Okay? So he's telling them, you are not fit to be around me. Okay? Plain and simple. You're just not fit. Don't try it. It's not going to go your way. So God spoke all these words. He says, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. These are the 10 commandments. Okay? These 10 commandments will be broken down in the latter part of Exodus and Leviticus. They will be broken down in the 613 individual laws. Okay? These laws will guide and direct the Israelites in what is allowed and what is not allowed, when is it allowed and when it is not allowed. They are basically the rules for their life. Okay? A good Israelite will sit there and look at these laws, and he'll rejoice in them. He'll rejoice in them because he knows God's will. He knows what it is that God says is wrong, and that's an amazing thing to know. It's an amazing thing to know what God thinks is evil. Okay? That gives us a huge leg up on life. Right now, you have a country that is literally completely and totally divided against itself because nobody knows right from wrong. Okay? Everybody's got their own moral code. We don't have to worry about that. We have our moral code. It's right here. There is no argument. Okay? Now there's some scuffles and everything on how to interpret this or how to interpret that, but when you look at the book as a total and you see those little scuffles, it's pretty minor. Okay? But we're going to go through these really carefully so that way we understand exactly what he's saying, both in the Hebrew and just in our practical lives. So number 1, you shall have no other gods before me. Again, God could have sat there and said, right now, there are no other gods. They don't exist. It's just me. Worship me. He doesn't say that. Okay? He says, you shall not have any other gods before me. I am number 1. I take precedent. Now, we do not live in a polytheistic culture anymore. Okay? Well, most of the world doesn't anyway. Okay? We either believe in God or we don't believe in God. But to sit there and think that doesn't really apply to us anymore is kind of faulty, because the reality is that while we not sit there and worship Allah, or we're not worshiping Ra, or we're not worshiping Zeus or anything like that, we do worship a lot of other things. Okay, figure out where your time is spent. That's what you worship, whether it be the TV, or whether it be a particular movie star, or whatever the case may be. What is taking your attention away from God? Okay, now I don't mean like literally on a minute-by-minute basis, 24 hours a day. Obviously, you have a life to live and everything with God centered in that life. But what I'm saying is I haven't come to church in the past month and a half and everything because I've been going to the boxing matches, or I've been going to the what's the thing with the monster truck rallies and all that kind of stuff. Okay, what are you replacing God with? That's the problem. Whatever that is, that's your God. You may not get down on all, on your knees and everything and bow down and worship it, but at the end of the day, you are allowing it to take you away from worshiping God. It has become your God. You have replaced God with it. So it says, you shall not make for yourself any image in the form of anything in heaven, above, or on the earth, beneath, or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children of the sin, or punishing children for the sin of the parents to the 3rd and the 4th generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. Okay? Now that sounds really, really harsh. Okay? Why would he do that? All right? Number 1, what did we just talk about a minute ago? The Israelites will do this over and over and over and over again. They will create idols. Okay? They will create idols that they bow down and they worship, and he's telling you, don't do that. Do not create a caricature of me. All right? I am much greater than this little caricature that you're going to make of me. All right? Do not do that. We're not supposed to have the statues and all that kind of stuff and everything. You're not supposed to have that. Why? Because inevitably, if you have a statue of Jesus, guess what's going to wind up happening? Sooner or later, somebody's going to be bowing down to it, kissing their hand, touching the foot of it, all that stuff. They're worshiping the statue, okay? That's what it is. They are worshiping the statue. Some people will sit there and say, well, no, they're worshiping what the statue represents. No, they're worshiping the statue, okay? That's why God sits there and says, don't do that. Don't do that. Because your mindset, you don't have the mind that you think you do. Your mind is going to be drifting off into something physical when he's telling you, I'm not physical. Okay? I'm everything. I'm all around you. You can't put me in this little box in your brain. I'm greater than that. So why does he punish the children and everything? Because most of the time, the children follow the ways of the parents. It usually takes several generations for that to get kind of knocked out. Okay, my father was not. I mean, I don't know if he was a Christian and deep down in his heart and everything like that, but he said GD all the time. He never went to church, never had a relationship that I ever saw with Jesus Christ. Do I think he believed in him? Probably. He wasn't an evil man, but he never, there was nothing in his life that I could ever look at and sit there and say, that man loved God. Okay, nothing. And I'm just being honest. I love my father, but there was nothing in his life that I could look at and say, that man loved Jesus. All right. Now, my mother, on the other hand, we would go to church and everything sporadically, and God bless her and everything. She taught me all about Jesus and what she knew. She didn't know the Bible from word one. I found that out later on down in life. But the thing is, though, was that she took what she knew and she tried to pass that down into me. If I would have looked at her and I would have said, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in Jesus, and I think all this is just a bunch of hogwash, it would have broke her heart. Because she genuinely would have believed that her son was going to hell. Okay? So I was spared from that. If my mother would have been a lot like my father, chances are I probably wouldn't be here right now. So that's the reason why. God will sit there and punish people for what they do, but he's telling them, don't start. Because if you start it, it's going to cascade. Okay? It's going to cascade down. Don't start it. Don't get away from me now, because you're going to teach your children, you're going to teach their children, you're going to teach their children, and it's just going to keep going down from generation to generation. Don't do that. So he says, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. So in other words, do not use the Lord's name in vain. Okay? So this one and everything, most people when they read this, they automatically think GD. Okay? That's not the only thing here. All right? And I'm guilty of this and everything. Like if you see a car wreck and you're like, oh my God. Okay? That's using the Lord's name in vain. I just used it for absolutely no reason. It's not like I was sitting there saying, oh, Lord God, please let everybody in that car wreck and everything be okay in the name of Lord Jesus, okay? I'm just looking at it in shock and awe and going, oh, my God. Okay, an atheist will sit there and say, oh, my God. All right? That is using the Lord's name in vain. All right? And I'm still guilty of that. It still pops out because it's just so ingrained into our culture. It's just something and everything that's there. But every single time I do it, I sit there and I think, sorry, my bad. Smack me upside the head or something. I mean, really, it really bothers me because it literally just comes out, and you don't think about it. And that's the problem, is when you're not thinking about it and it comes out. That shows your heart. And that's not me preaching and everything. That is an absolute condemnation of myself. Okay, when you do something and it just comes out of you like you didn't even know it was there, and you know that thing is sinful. That is something that you need to look back in on yourself and go, okay, why is there no alarm there that says radar, danger, Will Robinson? You're getting ready to go down a path you shouldn't go. So, what's up?
So it occurs to me also, and I don't know, if we say, I swear to God I'm going to do this.
Don't ever do that.
Also the same?
Yes.
Falling under the same thing.
And the reason why is because Jesus himself tells you do not do that.
I know that later, but I mean, just in context here. You
don't ever do that. And here's the thing and everything. So you sit there and you say to swear to God, okay? I swear to God that I'm going to do this. What exactly does that even mean? Like, I swear that if I don't do this, God doesn't exist. Like, like I swear that if I don't do this, I'm never going to follow God again. Like, what exactly are you swearing to? You're just using God's name in vain. All it is a way to bring the magnitude of that swear, of that oath and everything to the next level. And the reality is that if it really is the way it should be, our word should be enough. Okay, if I'm the kind of person that I'm literally giving somebody an oath that I'm going to do something and I don't do it, then that literally crushes my integrity. It has nothing to do with God. So it says, remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughters, nor your male or female servants, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So he's basically saying, look, I know you got to live your life. I know you got to do your work. I know you got to support your family. I know you got to do all this kind of stuff and everything. But there is a day, and he, for the Israelite people and everything, declares it to be the Sabbath. He says, that's mine. That is the day where you forsake everything else and you spend your time with me. Okay? And the Sabbath day in a Jewish household is it's an amazing thing. They're laughing, they're having fun, they have a wonderful meal, they're together with family, they're worshiping God, they're praising God, and it's just a day and everything where they come together and they realize that everything that they have is because of Him. And sometimes that's one of Satan's greatest tricks. Everybody always sits there and says one of the greatest Satan's greatest magic tricks and everything is to sit there and go, oh, I don't exist. Okay. You know what the other one was? That you got to go, 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 go. Okay. Never rest, never stop. Even on your days off, I got to go to the grocery store. I got to do this. I got to do that. I got to mow the grass. I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do this. Guess what, guys? You don't have to do anything. Okay. It's just the truth. You don't have to do anything. Now, this is something and everything that I'll be honest with you. This is not anything that I've ever really taken upon myself and everything to really hone in on. I got it to the point where I was not working on weekends anymore, so I could spend time with my family, so I could spend time in church and all that stuff. So I guess it was a step in that right direction. But that's something and everything that God has just been telling us down throughout the generations and everything to just stop. Okay, one of the things that God tells us and everything, be still, stop, and know that I am God. Just calm down. Okay? I got this. And the more you recognize that I have this, the more I'm going to have this. Okay? So that's one thing that this culture, especially in everything, has really gotten away from. But it's something that everything that we really should get back to. So it says, honor your mother and father, that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. So this is the only commandment that actually has a promise of long life. Predominantly because back then, whap a kid up the head with a stone or something like that if they got a life. So, honor your mother and father. This does not end when you turn 25 and get an apartment. Okay? Honor your mother and father. These guys lived in communities that were sometimes 3, 4, or 5 generations. Okay? They took care of their elderly. They took care of the young. They shared that generational knowledge. All right? That is how we are supposed to live. All right? We are supposed to take care of our parents. All right? We're supposed to help take care of our grandparents. Now, I know, especially, and really, I don't even think it has to do with a national type of thing or a cultural type of thing. There's always going to be butting heads. Okay? Always going to be butting heads with mothers and fathers and then the children. We did this way. You should do it this way. No, I want to do it my way. Things are different nowadays. This has literally been going on since the dawn of time. If it wasn't, God wouldn't have had to say this. Okay? So, but the point is, though, is that we have to realize that they are our parents, okay? And that is something that at least in the ability that we have in us, that should be honored. Now, are there deadbeat parents? Are there parents that aren't worth an absolute hoot? Okay? Yes, there is. Okay? But in those kind of situations, and I'm guilty of this with my first daughter and stuff like that, in those kind of situations, that's when you just have to do the best you can as a parent. And that's when you have to sit there and instead of constantly putting down the other parent, raise that kid up in Christ, raise that kid up in God, raise that kid up with nothing else, teaching them how to forgive. Because you don't know where that parent is going to be in 5 years. Okay? That parent could be dead, that parent could be a drug user, or that parent could find Christ and become a preacher that goes around the world. You don't know what God has in store for them. So, believe me, I could literally go on a tirade and everything for the next 3.5 hours about all the stuff that I see even now that I see my first daughter, Haley, her mom does. Okay, she is not a godly woman by any stretch of the imagination. But I don't know what God's going to do. Okay? So the first step is I have to forgive her for the things that she's done. I have to forgive my daughter for the things that she's done. And I have to pray to God and sit there and say, God, whatever your will, whatever you got to do, whether it be blowing in their ear or smacking them upside the head with a 2x4, get their attention and change this. Okay? That is the only thing that we can do that is righteous and holy. If I say, because this is what I did, and this is my sin, I was constantly trying to show, and I wasn't ever lying, that's the God's honest truth, but I was constantly trying to show the sin of the mother so that way the daughter would realize it and choose a more righteous path. It does not work. It does not work. Okay? All she sees is two polar opposites, and she only gets to choose one at that point. As opposed to if I would have been like, your mom's doing the best she can. Your mom doesn't believe in Jesus. That's the reason why she does some of the things she does. Let's pray for her. I really believe the relationship with my daughter would be much different than it is today. Okay? But that's where youth, I was in my early 20s, that's where youth comes in, and inexperience, and anger, and all sorts of other things and everything that pile up in us that are ungodly. That's where all that leads. So, honor your mother and father to the best of your ability.
And this is a little bit off the beaten path, but it's one of my points. It's almost to the point of being a cultural thing, because if you go to Japan, and I don't know what it is in modern day Japan, but all the families live together, generations live together.
Yeah, and that's the way it is with the Israelites. Yeah.
But here in America, it's how fast can we get you in a nursing home?
So, without getting, because I don't want to get too far off the topic and everything, but the best thing that I could possibly tell you that you want to read anything about that and everything is, I forget the gentleman's name. I have the book. It's a rather lengthy book. It's about 50 to 60 years old. It's called the Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things that is mentioned in there, he basically talks about 5 prerequisites for any empire to fall. Number 1, right out of the gate, destroy the family unit.
Right.
You destroy the family, you destroy the fabric of that country. It doesn't matter what country it is. Okay? So, and that's Satan. Now some people will say, well, Japan was, or China was behind it, or Russia was behind it, or whatever. No, it's Satan. Okay? Destroy the family unit. Take the fathers out of the house. Get the mothers addicted to drugs. Whatever the case may be. Destroy the family unit. And you destroy those kids' chance of living a wonderful and righteous and holy life. Okay? Because they're not meant to face those things at such a young age. So that's a really good book for that topic. So it says, verse 13, you shall not murder. We discussed this several times and everything, but I actually just had this conversation with my brother just the other day. You shall not murder. There are 8 words in the Hebrew language for essentially killing. Okay, you have killing for judicial killing, like the electric chair. You have killing for food. You have killing in self-defense. You have spontaneous killing. Somebody breaks into your house and boom, kind of thing. You have killing in war, which God commands. Okay, none of those is what is being talked about here. What is being talked about is literally the antithesis to all those things. It is the unlawful, premeditated murder of another human being. Okay? And Jesus talks about this. You've heard it be said, thou shalt not murder. I tell you, don't get angry. He's not saying never get angry. He's saying don't let yourself get to that place where you're that mad and that burnt on this idea that this person needs to go away. Okay? Don't let yourself get to that place. I don't care if you have to cut off your hand, poke out your eyeball, quit your job, break up with friends, whatever the case may be. Sacrifice whatever it is you have to sacrifice to get out of that situation so that you do not fall into that sinful pattern. So it says, you shall not commit adultery. Now, I've talked about this before. In this particular verse, it is not porneia, it is moikia. It is do not commit adultery. Do not have sex with somebody that is not your spouse. Okay? Do not do that. Now, later on down the line, God will actually sit there and kind of expand upon that, and he will talk about his relationship with Israel. In other words, when they're committing adultery, when the northern kingdom commits adultery and starts worshiping other gods, God actually issues a certificate of divorce to the northern kingdom. He says, I'm done with you, go away, get out. Okay? And essentially the northern kingdom is taken over by the Assyrians. But in God's mind, that is adultery. He is the groom. Israel is the bride. They are to be his. He is to be theirs. And they're like, don't like your rules. I'm going to go to this other God. Okay? That's committing adultery in God's eyes. But again, that for us, that goes back to the first commandment. You shall not have any other gods before me. But in this particular context, it's moikia. Do not have sex. Do not have sexual relations. Do not have sexual contact. Do not have sexual speech. Do not have sexual intent. Okay? Again, Jesus talks about that. It's not that you've already committed the sin if you're thinking about it in your mind, but if you're thinking about it in your mind and you're kind of making it known that you're thinking about it in your mind and the other person's not so opposed to you thinking about it in your mind, sooner or later, poof, it's going to happen. So don't do that. Okay? Get out of that situation. Whatever you got to do, you got to quit your job, whatever the case may be. Get away from that person. That person is going to cause you to sin. You shall not steal. So in other words, don't take anything that doesn't belong to you. It says, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. Don't lie. Don't lie, especially at the expense of somebody else, which, to be brutally honest with you, it's almost always at the expense of somebody else, okay? If you lie, you are literally doing the exact opposite of everything that Christ lived for, because Christ lived for truth. He lived for holiness. He lived for that righteousness in us. And when you are talking falsehoods and you are saying things that you know for a fact are not true, then you are literally going against everything that he taught. Okay? Some people will say, it's a little white lie. Who's it going to hurt? The reality is, and everything, it may not even hurt anybody. But God knows. God knows. And that has to do with your integrity. Okay? And God talks about that all throughout the Bible. Who you are when nobody's looking. So it says, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or his male or female servant, his ox or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. In other words, be content with what I have given you. If you want something, ask for it. Jesus says that. Ask for anything. If it's in God's will, it's yours. Okay? If it's not, then you know it's not God's will, and then, put your attention somewhere else. But don't look at your neighbor and sit there and go, why don't I have that? This right here, if we could literally just like 100% blanket this particular commandment throughout the entire country, you would see a change like that. Because everybody that is young nowadays, not everybody that's young, but a lot of people that are young, especially people going through these high institutes learning, Yale, Harvard, all that kind of stuff, they have this entitled just vision of life. You have it, why don't I have it? Why can I not have what you have? Why do I have to work as hard as you had to work and everything? I should just get it. My dad is a multimillionaire and everything. When he dies, I'm going to get all that. Why? Because I'm his son. Solomon talks about that in Ecclesiastes. He said, everything that I got, that I've worked for, that I labored for, it's going to go to this idiot. That's exactly what it did. It went to that idiot. And within a few months after that idiot taking the crown and everything, the kingdoms were completely and totally divided. Okay? And it's stupidity. I have told my children numerous times over, I will die poor, and if I die rich, I'll leave them a few $1,000s to get something started and everything, a business or buying a house or whatever the case may be. That's it. If I die a billionaire, they ain't getting it. No way. That is the quickest way to mess a kid up faster than anything, is make them rich, just like that. No experience, no nothing, no wisdom, nothing behind it. No, that is a bad thing to do. So it says, When the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear, and they stayed at a distance and said to Moses, "Speak to us yourself, and we'll listen. But do not have God speak to us again, or we're going to die." So Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. God has come to test you, so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning." In other words, he wanted to show exactly who he is. He wanted to show that this isn't just me, that he's there, that he knows what you're doing, so that way you have this in your mind and in your hearts. And it says the people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. So let me, hold on here, I got to figure out. It's close to it. One more. There we go. So he just sat there and he said, God was testing you. Okay? God was testing you. And he sits there and he says, "Do not be afraid. God has come to test you so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning." So if you go to the Proverbs, right out of the gate, where is it? More benefits to wisdom. Well, it's somewhere around here. But anyway, in the Proverbs and everything, right out of the gate somewhere, it's within the first couple of chapters. I think it's in the first chapter somewhere. I'm just not seeing it. But it sits there and it says, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Okay? So he's telling them right out of the gate. He's just like, God is testing you so that you will have the fear of God. And I've taught this before. I think I taught this like way early in the earlier classes and everything like that. You know, I've heard it be said that, well, it's not actually talking about fear. We're not really supposed to fear God. God loves us and God is our Father and everything. No, you're supposed to fear God. Okay, God is God, you are not. God is God, you are dust. If you do not fear that, then you do not believe in that. Okay? I'm going to get yelled after this later. But it's just a fact, okay? You're going to stand before the almighty holy Father that created literally every single molecule that is in the entire universe and can blink you out of existence just by thinking about it. Nah, man, we're cool. We're cool. I love you too, man. Like, no. No.
Proverbs 9:10.
Thank you. Good job. A+. Proverbs 9:10. So, yeah, I mean, it's no, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. You cannot take one step towards being wise until you understand your place in this universe. And guess what? It's not God's. Okay? Just plain and simple. And I know that sounds incredibly obvious, but you'd be amazed how many people don't live like that. Okay? That just don't live with that fear inside of them. Okay? It doesn't mean that you have to get on your knees trembling when you pray, but you need to understand that there is a righteous and holy God that is watching everything that you do. And yes, you can make him angry with you, even though I've heard that taught before. You can make him angry with you. And everything that you do, whether your husband sees it, or your wife sees it, or your children see it, he sees it. And he will judge it. And there is no dark corner that you can go into. There is no closet that you can slink into. There is no rock that you can hide under that is going to stop him from seeing your sin, calling it out on the day of judgment, and making you pay for it if you have not been atoned by the blood of Christ. Okay? It's just a fact. You know, I don't fear a lot of things. I fear God. Because what if I got something wrong? What if I didn't understand something the way I was supposed to understand it? What if I just did something in God's eyes that, like, I know the only sin that is not forgiven is blasphemy of the Holy Spirit. But, like, what if I did something in my life where God's like, oh, man, write that down in the book. What he just did, like, that's a no-go. That's a deal breaker. Seriously, I think about that kind of stuff. Like, what exactly if I have done something in my life that is so repugnant to God that he has to really question whether or not I'm coming in or not? okay? Because he's God. And I can read this book and I can teach this book for the rest of my life. And I will still know only a small percentage, an infinitesimal percentage of who God is. He's that great. He's that powerful. He's that awesome. He's that godly. And that is just an amazing thing to think that sooner or later we're all going to be there and we're going to get to know it. I really think one of the reasons why we're going to be in eternity with him is because it's going to take that long just for us to truly know him. He's that amazing. So like I said, I was, at the very beginning of the class, I sat there and I talked about you can literally look it up on the computer. All the different things that God has called, and sit there and think to yourself, what have I experienced of God? I know that he's my salvation. And I know that he's my shield, and I know that he's my sword. I've seen these things. I've experienced them. But like the Lord is my banner. The Lord, when somebody sees me coming towards them, do they see God? Do they see the Lord's banner up above, sitting there going, that's a holy man right there? I wouldn't think so. I haven't experienced that yet. I hope one day to, but I haven't experienced that yet. So, sits there and he says, then the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites this, you have seen for yourselves that I have spoken to you from the heavens. Do not make any gods to be alongside me. Do not make for yourselves gods of silver or gods of gold. Make an altar of earth for me and sacrifice your burnt offerings and fellowship worship offerings and your sheep and your goats and your cattle. Wherever I cause my name to be honored, I will come to you and bless you. If you make an altar of stones for me, do not build it with dressed stones, for you will defile it if you use a tool on it. And do not go up on my altar on steps, or your private parts will be exposed, or some Bibles say your nakedness will be exposed. So in other words, keep it low, make it out of the things that he has created. He doesn't need this beautiful little thing, okay? God will sit there and say the exact same thing to David. David is looking down, and it doesn't really say this in the Bible, but you can kind of infer it from what's going on. But David is looking down on the tabernacle, and I would imagine it's raining or something like that. And he's sitting there thinking, he's like, I had this palace, this beautiful palace. But God's out there in the rain. He has a box and a tent. And he's like, I want to make a house for God. I want to do that for him. And God says, well, I appreciate that. I don't need that. I created the rain and the tent and the box and the world and the universe. It's kind of all my house. I don't need that. But I'll let your son do it for me. Okay? Because he knew it, not because he needed it, because he knew it meant that much to David. And like I said, we all call it David's temple, or Solomon's temple. It wasn't. It was David's temple. David did everything to it other than put block upon block. He cut the stones. He dressed the stones. He wrote 73 out of the 150 psalms that we know of. He was the one who trained the priests for the temple. He did everything there was to do. The only thing he did not do was put stone upon stone. That was it. And it still took Solomon 7 years to build it. So anyway, and just so that way we know Solomon's heart, it took 7 years for Solomon to build a temple that was probably about 40 to 50% built. It took him 14 years to build his own palace that was primarily made out of ivory. So you could see right from the get-go where Solomon's heart was. A lot of people, it's kind of like the children's Bible and everything like that. Solomon was the wisest man. No, he was not. No, he wasn't. Solomon was not a great king. He was a very wealthy king, and he did a lot of good stuff and everything. But Solomon, first thing out of the gate that we're going to see in Deuteronomy, okay, do not go back to Egypt. I brought you out of Egypt. Do not go back to Egypt. Solomon becomes king. He marries an Egyptian princess. He gets a bunch of Egyptian horses. Do not have a bunch of riches. Solomon became the richest person probably on the planet, okay, and even nowadays, by nowadays standards. Do not have a whole bunch of horses and chariots. He had cities, literal cities of chariots and horses, okay? He was that wealthy and that renowned, all right? Solomon did everything as a king God said not to do. Everything. So when somebody sits there and says, well, he had the wisdom of God, yes, he did. But God also it was a double-edged sword. He said, with that wisdom, I'm going to give you great wealth. Let's see which one wins. It wasn't the wisdom. It was the wealth. So now, when he wrote Proverbs with several of his, wise friends and everything, are they wonderful things to read and a lot of wisdom in those words? Absolutely. I tell my kids all the time and everything, read Proverbs. It's an amazing read. I love Proverbs. But as far as how he raised his kingdom and everything, no, he wasn't that great. He did a lot of things God said not to do. So I guess we're going to stop there because I don't want to start chapter 21 and everything. And we only got a few minutes to go. We should be probably going to be out of Exodus in about 2 to 3 weeks. I would think probably 3. So then, and actually it's a really good place and everything to stop, because in chapter 21 we are going to start breaking down all the different little things and everything that God says that we're supposed to do. So in other words, the 613 laws, we're going to break those down. Okay, we're going to start out with your Hebrew servants and all that kind of stuff, how you handle slaves, how you handle property, how you handle all this stuff. And a lot of it may actually surprise you. It really does. I mean, when you read it, it's really kind of a culture shock and everything, because you're kind of sitting there going like, wow, God actually told him to do that. But again, you have to remember the culture, and you have to remember there's a reason why he tells them to do everything. So we'll stop there.